It's a very different kind of diet in that way. The starting point isn't some kind of vanity project, but it starts with the spiritual.
As an ER doctor, as an emergency medicine doctor, when I talk about health and diet and lifestyle, I have a very different aim. And the reason for that is I work in a space where I'm taking care of everything and anything that walks through the door. And I see the manifestation of a spiritual problem on a societal scale in the goal of allowing people to do whatever they want without any accountability and without a common goal. I think we're getting it wrong. And you see human nature unmasked, and you see the worst of human nature, and you see some of the best of it. A quick story, we have a very famous population in Pennsylvania called the Amish. The Amish are famous for kind of living sort of as if they're still, pilgrims. They refuse to use certain technologies. They still dress a certain way. And when you see a 12-year-old come into your emergency department that has just been run over by a tractor, and they have 20 bones broken in their body, their spleen is lacerated, their liver is bruised, their lung is collapsed, and you ask them, hey, do you need some pain medication? And the child looks at you and he says, I'm fine. And then you see the average American come through and they're freaking out. Oh my God, I just can't take this, doc. This is just too much. And this is just terrible pain. I'm very bad with needles. There's a huge spectrum of what it means to tolerate suffering and tolerate pain. And it's very cultural. And unfortunately, in the United States, we've gotten so good at removing struggle and difficulty and, things like discipline and delayed gratification that we've become extremely soft. And so I bring this all back to say that the Athos Diet is a recognition that as we progress as a society and civilization, we need something in our lifestyle that keeps us raw, sober, and can teach us things that are visceral. You can be a member of society in 2025 and literally never have a reason to exercise, and therefore never have a reason to learn discipline or delayed gratification or patience. But everyone gets hungry every day. Everyone needs to eat every day. And so if I can press on those buttons to ensure that people learn these incredible core features at a young age, ideally, we can change the world. And as you look back in these old and ancient societies on how they took care of their families and their society, fasting was a major part of it. And the problem in the American culture is that we have created a 24/7 eating binge where we eat all the wrong foods at all the wrong times, and we need to wake people up. And fasting's the way to do it. And the Athos Diet, drawing on the traditions of the Orthodox Church that's been around for 2,000 years, and specifically in the communities of Mount Athos in Greece, where they've been practicing a certain way of life for at least 1,000 years, that's where we find the salve for suffering and the medication that we all need to live fuller, better lives, and by all means, healthier lives.
Society have learned everyone that they are so weak that they can't do things that their forefathers did. But actually you can. You just have to take a step in that mindset that you actually can. You can do much more, not just a little bit, but much more.
If you have a society that's so consumeristic and trying to create everything at the cheapest price, cutting corners, making it cheap, gaming the system, you will have an area the size of Texas floating in the Pacific Ocean of plastic, which is true. You will have endless acreage of food that's made in plenty that's kind of poison. You will have genetically modified foods that we've never consumed ever in the history of humankind.
Just follow the money. I know it's cliche, but look at the big companies that produce the GMO and so forth, and then look at the pharmaceutical companies. They are the big investors in both domains. It's like, I give you this food, it will make you sick. And when you're sick, you can take this medicine that I also have. And when this medicine doesn't work and make you feel even worse, I have an even better medicine, so take this.
All of this stuff comes with this curiosity, this obsession with tools and technology for the sake of I don't know what. We can take a problem and make a problem for everyone. It used to be just limited by zip code, by region, by valley, by river system. Now you can take that and scale it up. It's called globalization. Everyone suffers. As we become grander and grander and greater, our reach expands and our problems magnify. It's really catching up to the real world. There's going to be some growing pains. But you know what? For those people who are already training and fasting and signing up for the uncomfortable, when the problem happens, I don't think it's gonna harm us so much, because we'll already be prepared. But there's going to be a lot of people that aren't prepared.
Hello and welcome back to the Metanoia Path podcast with me, your host, Matthias Lidborn. For today's episode 7, we will be joined by Dr. Pete Patitsas. Dr. Pete Patitsas is, among many things, he is an author, and specifically the author of the Athos Diet, in which we will delve into in this episode. He is also a former rugby player, and actually he represented the Greek national team in 2015. He's also a father of 4, and he is a ER doctor. And some of you might also recognize the name Patitsas, and that's right, he is related to Timothy Patitsas, who wrote the book The Ethics of Beauty. With no further ado, here's the episode. Enjoy. Thanks for coming on, and welcome to the Metanoia Path podcast with me, Matthias Lidborn. And today we have Pete Patitsas with us, or should I say Dr. Pete Patitsas. Welcome.
Yeah,
Pete.
That's fine. Pete's just fine. But yeah, I'm one of the doctors in the ER. If you ever see me there, that's what I go by. But outside of that job description, I'm just Pete.
Okay, we go with Pete. Great. So the reason I wanted to talk with you today was I come across your book, The Athos Diet, and it's very interesting, and it really fits well with me because I've been fasting for 15 years in every day, but different schedules. First starting out fasting, just prolong the meal, but then going to the traditional, or what's the most common, 16 fasting and 8 hours of feeding window. But
some variety of intermittent fasting.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a hold to that since I started, actually. And for me, it took not that long before I noticed that the best pattern for me was fasting 24 hours, eating once a day. But it's very, so I have tried out many different eating patterns adjusted to the lifestyle. So that was really interesting for me. And I read your book, and there was a lot there. I wanted to hear more of your ideas fleshed out. And before I let you tell us a little bit about your credentials and your background and so forth, I just want to say that this is a very a different kind of diet in that way that it doesn't, the starting point isn't to try to make one's image or the what you say bodily ideal image in as some kind of vanity project, but it starts with the spiritual.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think sort of drawing from my background, that's exactly why, as an ER doctor, as an emergency medicine doctor, when I talk about health and diet and lifestyle, I have a very different aim. And the reason for that is I work in a space where I'm taking care of grandmothers that are having their first stroke, fathers who have children who are having their first heart attack, people that are in their 20s who are on dialysis because their kidneys are shutting down. And I see the manifestation of a spiritual problem on a societal scale, really a national scale. When you really start looking at the statistics, the United States is blessed with a lot of resources, and it's blessed with a lot of wealth, but at the same time, it has a certain degree of spiritual bankruptcy, which is ironic. Um, because I think to some extent the narrative normally is something like, if you are blessed and if you are aligned with God, wealth follows you, progress follows you. And this to some extent is kind of the narrative in the Old Testament, as the Israeli and Jewish people were supposed to align themselves with their creator, and then God would take care of them. So we have a certain feeling that that must be true, and I think to some extent it can be. But we also see that there are sins of the left and sins of the right. And, sins of the right, you can take things too extreme and be too rigid and too tyrannical. And then there's sins of the left where you're too lax and too used to comfort, and things can sort of get lost. And so the United States is kind of an oddity because there's a lot of strong aspects of it, but we're using it overall, I think, to support the wrong way of life and the wrong lifestyle. And in this in this effort of being secular and of separating church from state, which is a funny thing because I think that's a historical anomaly. But in the goal of allowing people to do whatever they want without any accountability and without a common goal, I think we're getting it wrong. And as I said before, I work in the emergency department. My shifts are in the night, they're during holidays, they're during weekends. I mean, I work 12 hours, sometimes 24 hours, and I'm taking care of everything and anything that walks through the door. And you see human nature unmasked, and you see the worst of human nature, and you see some of the best of it. Um, a quick story, we have a very famous population in Pennsylvania called the Amish, and the Amish are famous for kind of living sort of as if they're still, pilgrims. They refuse to use certain technologies. They still dress a certain way. And when you see a 12-year-old come into your emergency department that has just been run over by a tractor, and they have 20 bones broken in their body, their spleen is lacerated, their liver is bruised, their lung is collapsed, and you ask them, hey, do you need some pain medication? And the child looks at you and he says, I'm fine, I'm okay. And then you see the average American come through, and they need to have an IV placed in their arm, and they're freaking out. Oh my God, I just can't take this, doc. This is just too much. And this is just terrible pain. I'm very bad with needles. And so what you start to realize is that there's a huge spectrum of what it means to tolerate suffering and tolerate pain. And it's very cultural. And unfortunately, in the United States, we've gotten so good at removing struggle and difficulty and things like discipline and delayed gratification that we've become extremely soft. And it shows. It shows in the fact that we have 100 million people in the United States that have diabetes or prediabetes. 75% of us are overweight. 40% are morbidly obese. And when I say morbidly obese, I mean people are, I guess you're working in kilos, but 300 kilos. They can't even fit into the CAT scan machine to see if they have appendicitis or a colitis on a CAT scan. And so, not only that, but we spend something like $5 trillion a year, maybe more, on healthcare, but we have some of the worst outcomes in the world in terms of the developed world. And so all of this then translates into 100,000 or more fentanyl deaths every year from overdose and 50,000 suicides. And you just start wondering, like, what the hell is happening? And so I bring this all back to say that the Athos Diet is a recognition that as we progress as a society in civilization, we need something in our lifestyle that keeps us raw, sober, and can teach us things that are visceral. And there's no better way of doing that. It's even better than exercise when you think about it, right? A lot of teenage kids, a lot of boys, young men, hey, I learned discipline in the gym. I respect that. That's good. But there's something more universal about modifying our eating habits that's even more powerful. And we can talk about why that is physiologically, anatomically, medicinally. But one of the reasons I want to bring this up is that I know people that have never exercised a day in their life. Like it's amazing. You can be a member of society in 2025 and literally never have a reason to exercise, and therefore never have a reason to learn discipline or delayed gratification or patience. But everyone gets hungry every day. Everyone needs to eat every day. And so if I can press on those buttons to ensure that people learn these incredible core features at a young age, ideally, we can change the world. And as being an Orthodox Christian, I'm a Greek Orthodox Christian. My family comes from an island in Greece. We were there for 1,000 years or more. But as you look back in these old and ancient societies on how they took care of their families and their society, fasting was a major part of it. And they might not have called it that, but it was part of their culture, so that as the year progressed, they took their culture seriously and they lived by it, and it just became who they were and what they did. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. You know that something is a part of your culture when you no longer have to make a concerted effort to do it. And the problem in American culture is that we have created a 24/7 eating binge where we eat all the wrong foods at all the wrong times, and we're not active, and we're not taking our health seriously, and we don't even know it's happening. We are all asleep in America, and we need to wake people up, and fasting's the way to do it. And the Athos Diet, drawing on the traditions of the Orthodox Church that's been around for 2,000 years, and specifically in the communities of Mount Athos in Greece, where they've been practicing a certain way of life for at least 1,000 years. That's where we find the salve for suffering and the medication that we all need to live fuller, better lives, and by all means, healthier lives.
Yeah, great points there. And about the oversaturated comfort, that is real poison for humans. And as you said, with the Amish boy, in comparison to a full-grown man, I suppose, that is afraid of needles and so forth. And you can also hear, like, I call a scream for before a person that is afraid of death.
Yes.
And that is also, fasting is like not a death, but it's a kenosis. It's an emptying, and that is purifying the being that fast, the human. And that also then it creates this fear of not be able to make it with a sparse, actually no matter what it is, food, entertainment, comfort, because it is hard to quench the own voice when you are in silence, when you are emptying yourself from all the entertainment, and also the food that you always put in your mouth, that is just a distraction, and also a numbing of the of the consciousness. And yeah, it's really crazy over there in the US, but in all the Western world, it's because we're mimicking the US in many
Hmm.
ways over.
Yeah, it's interesting that the health trends that used to be in the United States 20, 30 years ago are now present in the UK, in Mexico, in various parts of Europe even. Now, what is kind of interesting, and again, this is sort of the the value of living in necessity, is that when you go to places in Eastern Europe or different parts of Europe that still are limited by necessity, their health is better. So they don't have, let's say, the wealth of the United States. So they just have to do things differently. And that saves them. And again, it's a funny thing because I saw one of your Instagram posts about animal nature versus human nature, and how in humanity we have to kind of create more parameters to keep us disciplined and limited. And the reason for that also is because animals ultimately are limited by their environment, by necessity. Like, one way or another, reality keeps them from eating all sorts of things. A tiger needs 70 square kilometers of territory to find one deer if he's lucky for in 2 weeks, But a human being will take, 4,000 square meters and create enough food and uh, wealth, so to speak, to eat every moment of the day if they wanted. And so it's a funny thing. I think the same phenomenon works out across human society, where if you get too wealthy and you haven't found those techniques to keep yourself raw and sober and hardworking and limited, then you start suffering. And there's this incredible phrase, there's this incredible Greek phrase from Mount Athos, and it goes something like this: Ian pathenis, prin pathenis, then tha pathenis, otan pathenis. What it means is, it translates to English as, if you die before you die, then when you die, you will not die. And this goes exactly to what you said, Matthias, is that people who are scared of pain oftentimes are scared of death. And that conversation about death in America is so foreign and so rare that when I meet people who are 75, 80, 90, 100, and I say, hey, sir, it looks like your heart is failing. The best of medication today is not going to make you any better. Do you want us to do CPR? Do you want us to put a tube in your throat, put you on a ventilator, do all these procedures to get you better? And they said, I've never thought about that before. And I'm just thinking to myself, wow, man, like, you've gone 80, 90, 100 years and you've never thought about death? That's kind of what they're saying. And I think what's so amazing about fasting, again, is that self-denial and that delayed gratification eventually calls on the discussion of what death is, and as a result, what is life about. And
Yeah.
you can only live so deeply if you don't understand that death is inevitable. Um, and I remember there was a quote from some actor, some Hollywood movie star. He said uh, something like, the day I began to live was the day that I realized that I I was going to die. Like something like that. Like, my second life began the day that I realized that I only have one life. Something like that. And it's so true. There's this remembrance of death that actually makes life even more vivid. And when you look back to Genesis, the very first story of human creation, there is this incredible dialogue between the serpent and Eve, and between Adam and Eve and God eventually. And there were three promises when we left paradise, just three. And it was that there was going to be a lot of work, a lot of pain, and there was going to be death. And when you work in the emergency department, you see those three things all the time. And what it does is it creates a way of looking at things in your life, and at things like diet and health, that really remind you about what effort is all about and how close to death we all are. I like to tell people the miracle is not that Western medicine saves us every day we go to the emergency department. The real miracle is that we don't all die 100 different ways every day. And there's just so many ways that things go wrong. And it really is a miracle every day that we are on this earth without tragic things that happen all the time to everyone around us in our own communities, our own village. So fasting really is, as I'm describing it, an absolute paradigm shift. It is a spiritual process. And I understand there's going to be some people that use it just for the biohack. But the reality is that, fasting is a tool that needs to be aligned with something that's higher, a higher good. And if we can align our bodies with God, good things happen. If we just simply look at these biohacks as tools, why the hell do I want you to live 40% longer and avoid 90% disease if you're just going to watch Netflix every day? If you're never going to have a family, if you're never going to be a leader, if you're never going to help those that are suffering and in tragedy, like why do I want to do that? Why should you have that privilege? And so this is where we have to make sure that these biohacks and these fasting practices that really are medically valuable are aligned with something worthwhile.
Yeah. A wording that comes to mind can be a little bit harsh, but if you just want to watch Netflix and don't start a family and so forth, isn't that kind of a waste of skin? And a little bit harsh, but that's what's come to my mind. But and also a little bit more about the death part there.
Mm-hmm.
It's crucial and essential for human prosperity, because death is what makes us love, makes us strive, make us do things in the right order and in the right way. And also death, as you said, die in the right way it's like a fermenting process. You ferment some food in the right way, and it dies, but then it somehow get everlasting life, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And
like
that's
that. It's
also
good.
and as Matthew say, he who loses his lives will find it. And if we die in the right way in Christ, then we will get eternal life. So it's extremely important. But as you said, it's the insight of death or the attention to death is lacking in the whole Western world. You try to get rid of it, and you treat yourself like a car, and you come into these places that actually look like just
mechanic.
they're no beauty. They're no beauty.
Right. Yeah, it is. It does look industrial. It does. And again, there's a lot of power and a lot of horsepower that comes with industrializing things and the modern healthcare system that we have, but it just can't solve every problem. We can't, as I mentioned, this crisis in America. I mean, 25 years ago, the national debt was like 8 trillion. Now it's nearly 40 trillion. And our budget is only increasing, and our quality of life and longevity in America is actually decreasing. So it's a funny thing. I mean, if we were to compare this to a household, if I told you that dad is in so much debt that the interest payments of his debt is a quarter of his budget, you would say dad must have a drug problem. Dad must be betting on horses. He's not doing something right. And that's exactly where we are in the United States. And it's a funny thing because, you wonder to some extent, like, when is this song going to end? When are we going to finally say, like, I don't know if I want to loan money to the United States. I don't know if we're going to spend $1 trillion extra this year on things that are excessive and strange and unnecessary and unprofitable and unsustainable. And one of those things that we spend a lot of money on is healthcare. And so it's a tough scenario for any global leader right now to understand, like, how do we make people healthy again? How do we rein in our budget without completely calling on, I don't know, revolution, calling on incredible economic collapse? But in some ways, it all stems from a spiritual beginning, a philosophical beginning. Because if I could teach all of the United States to fast and to move in the cadence and rhythm of an ancient way of life, I'm telling you, the studies show that when you, and we haven't talked about the specifics of the Athos diet yet, but the studies show that when you employ this diet, it is a cure to 90%, well, it prevents 90% of disease and extends life by up to 40%. So, how would that change society? I mean, what, we wouldn't need 80% of the 5 trillion? We wouldn't need 4 trillion of the healthcare spending? That would be savings. And over decades, that would be massive savings. We could extend people's lives to make them functional, to keep them from having Parkinson's and dementia and Alzheimer's. How would that change society? Everyone's talking about how the boomers, that's what they call this old group of people right now that are retiring, the boomers, there's going to be this wealth transfer. And they're like, oh, yes, that's going to go to their children. No, it's not. It's going to go to healthcare bills and nursing homes. And I'm seeing this already. People are so disconnected by geography, by priority, by virtue, by mindset from their parents. They're just going to stick their parents in a nursing home. And those nursing homes are expensive. And so all of that wealth that people amassed over their life, just on the most business, like, I'm just talking from a secular standpoint, never mind the duty you have to take care of your parents, but just from a secular standpoint, it's going to bankrupt America. And I don't see how you can run away from this. We need to take it head on. And it's things like fasting. It's so simple. It's so Christian. It's so universal. It's things like that will prevent us from economic collapse. It really is. It really is. The U.S. is in a tough spot. And if it doesn't do something very extreme, we are not going to be able to just keep floating trillions of dollars. I mean, I think we spend $60 billion a year on the diet industry in America alone. That's the entire economy of the country of Hungary. We just spend on diet trends. I mean, it's extraordinary, the scale and scope of the United States, but also the absolute waste. It's at a scale that I myself, like, I have difficulty really grasping. It's so big.
Yeah, this is why this is so interesting when you also see it from a more traditional spiritual angle, and because it connect many different aspects of society, as you said, with the children that don't want to take care of their older parents. As you are from Greece, and you still have this household where you can live with your mom and your dad and your grandma and so forth. But in the Western world, that it's liberated, and
Right.
of course, it's also going to this that because we have to work as much as we have to work today, not as before in the olden days where one worked and the wife was at home and took care of the children. But today we need two incomes to even be able to
Survive.
manage. Yeah, survive, exactly. And then you leave your children. You're almost pushed to leave your children in a daycare, with all the problems of that today, with all the indoctrination and so forth. But so that will lead also that because of your left as a child from your parents when you're real young, and you let this and the government raise your children in a way that cuts the bondage of the parents, and the children won't take care of their parents either.
Yeah.
So
Well said.
it's and also this numbing of both your soul and your news and your mental capacity to reflect on things and orient yourself in a healthy manner also becomes harder because you got limited of time to focus on your health and so forth.
Yeah.
And,
No, you're
yeah.
right. It just bleeds into everything. It bleeds into
Yeah.
everything.
So fasting becomes this really, really essential part of the healing of people, because we need to drain our polluted, sewer systems to get more clear-headed, and also, it's connects with God is also easier.
Well, it's so irrational to fast. It doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, where would you, as a rational human being made of flesh and blood, come to the conclusion that limiting yourself is somehow good? It's only in a Christian way of thinking of things that even becomes logical. And I like to draw on this story from the 1970s. There was this rugby team that was flying over the Andes Mountains, and their plane crashed. And this is such a famous story that it's usually in like ethics classes, philosophy classes, because what ended up happening is, because this plane was so high up in the mountains, in so rural of an area, they couldn't be found, and it was very cold. And so basically this rugby team, the survivors, had to decide at one point if they were going to oh, did I lose you?
Yeah, I don't see your screen now.
Give me 1 second here. You can still hear me, is that true?
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear.
1 second.
Yeah, it's no problem. I will just cut it out. So
No worries.
And also, I forgot to say to you before we start, if you wonder why I drink so much, it's not because I'm rude to you here. It's I have a thyroid problem with my food. So yeah, that's why I have a hard time to speak. So
No
I
problem.
need to
No
clear
problem.
it out.
I didn't notice anything. You're doing great.
Yeah. Okay.
Am I back?
You're back. You're back. Yes.
Okay. So just to say where we left off. So essentially, the ethics class comes together and they say, hey, if you were in that plane and you had to decide whether or not you were going to cannibalize, literally eat your teammates in order to survive,
Sorry for interrupting you, but they made a movie.
Yeah.
It's a movie. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I saw it when I was really young, and that particular movie have stuck in my mind.
Yeah,
I reflected on it so much.
It's a crazy tragedy. But I'll say this. This is the wild part about it, is that usually your professor will pose the scenario as, what would you do in this situation, and to what extent can you justify anything out of necessity? And you'll have a conversation for an hour about it, and people will come to different conclusions.
Hello there. Just a quick interruption from the conversation here. I will just inform you that if you would like any coaching session with me, you can easily do that by just sending me a mail, and you will receive a free consultation. And if you put the episode name in the mail, you will get additional free hour of coaching. Also for personal training and diet plans. Just hit me on the mail or send me a PM on Instagram or YouTube. Thank you very much. And now back to the conversation.
And you'll have a conversation for an hour about it, and people will come to different conclusions. But I remember having this debate And at the end of the debate, I raised my hand and I said, Professor, didn't the people in the plane end up getting saved? Like they found them? And they said, oh yes, this is true. And I said, how did that happen? And it was, there was this guy who refused to participate in cannibalism, and he walked. He walked to get help. And I just feel like so much of the human condition is exactly that phenomenon. It is, we self-exile ourselves from the solution, from the cure, when in reality, if we just took the higher road and said, you know what? I was taught, no matter what, no matter how rational, no matter how justifiable, I'm supposed to do one thing and not another thing. And that comes down to just strong principles, which are taught in our Christian faith and specifically the Orthodox faith. And so this man walks and saves the rest of the survivors. Like, what a powerful lesson to learn. So I bring this back to fasting to say that we oftentimes self-exile ourselves from the cure. We think to ourselves, oh, in this situation, I'm so hungry and I'm so, I feel so limited right now. Why don't I grab this food? I can justify anything. And oh, I have this sensation of hunger tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Let me feed that impulse. The reality is that we should not feed that impulse. We need to have dominion over our own selves, our own bodies. And how will that translate into how we then have dominion over everything around us? This is related, but I think it's also very powerful. So the first story we talked about, the Andes Mountains and this rugby team and the guy that listened to his principles and he knew he had to just keep marching forward no matter what, and he saved them all. He saved them all. No ethical dilemma there. But there was this study, I think it was out of Australia, called the ACE study, and they followed tens of thousands of children over their lifetime, and they noticed that there was a particular cohort, a particular group of them that lived literally 20 years less, that were homeless, abused drugs, committed suicide, had health problems, didn't get married, didn't have children, all sorts of manner of problems. What's happening? What's happening? And they realized, they came down to this adverse childhood events, that if these people at a young age were even as much exposed, and many times often were victims of childhood abuse, whether that's neglect or assault or, many different problems, drug problems, sexual assault. I mean, name the sin, it's there. That they literally manifested that in their lives later on in a shorter lifespan. And really all outcomes were worse. And so I bring that up to say that if we can literally change the lifespan of a child through negative experiences, can we extend their lives and improve their lives with positive tools? And one of those things has to be fasting, which is why in the tradition of the Orthodox faith, you're supposed to start fasting as early as 7. And you might say to yourself, oh my gosh, we're asking this child to basically go vegan for 200 days a year. That's so oppressive. Well, let me tell you about something that's not oppressive. When I was 7 fasting, it just seemed like every Wednesday and Friday they were having birthday parties. All the cupcakes were there. All the cakes were there. And I, as a 7-year-old, had to go through this dilemma, which is, do I give in to gratification? Do I lose control? Do I reach for something I know I shouldn't? Or do I take the higher road? And I'll tell you that the dilemma I faced, the resentment, the judgment, the annoyance, the frustration, the visceral feeling that, oh my gosh, I can't participate. It really sucks. By the age of 9, I didn't care anymore. It didn't matter. And if I can teach a child delayed gratification, patience, discipline, self-control, what will they not be able to achieve in their lives? What role in your life doesn't benefit from a person that understands that at a visceral level when they're in high school, when they're in college, when they have families, when they're CEOs, when they're project leaders? I mean, all of those qualities are so essential for success. And I can teach that to a child. And this is the key, because, and we haven't talked about this yet, but there's a reason that God himself chose fasting, as in Adam and Eve they can't eat of the apple, eat something. Why did he choose an eating rule? It was because the enteric nervous system that lines your gut, there's 100 million neurons there. 10 to 30% of our energy that we consume every day is just to feed the digestive tract, like to make it work. It is one of the most sensitive structures in our body. There's 100 trillion bacteria that live in our gut when there's only 30 trillion cells in our body. And there's huge intervention between our brains and our gut, that a very strong complex of neurotransmitters that are created and made, and there's an interplay. I bring this up to say that our gut is very core to who we are. So that if I can not just teach someone something by their brain, but I can have them feel the lesson within themselves, that is such a more powerful lesson than it is to open up a book and say, hey, I'm supposed to read these 7 points, memorize them. Okay, I'm supposed to be non-judgmental. What does that mean to a 7-year-old? I can teach you what it means to be non-judgmental when you can't eat the cupcake on Wednesdays and Fridays and eventually you don't care. Like, that's the difference. And that's the genius behind the Christian faith and this paradigm between the body's health and the spiritual health. That's how it all connects. So we feel the lesson. We don't just learn the lesson, we feel it. And exactly. that's the $1 million answer right there. That's why it's so powerful.
Yeah, 2 things there. I'm sitting here smiling, as you can see, because you said you were done with this. You were done with this this
dilemma.
Dilemma. When you were 9 years old, and I'm smiling because when I was 9 years old, I was a bit overweight, and I hated it. I didn't like it. My idols was like Van Damme and all these guys. Yeah, so
of course.
Yeah. So when I was 9, I just said to myself, I will stop eating crap. I stopped eating cookies, candy, everything, and that has made such a groundwork from my discipline, habits, and the realization that we live in this amount of excess that we don't really need it. Not in no way we need it. And it I don't mean that we should regress to like medieval standards, but almost. Actually almost. I can't see
right
that it, you know, the technology have some benefits, but there is also this, we have to give back to it, and it's our life it takes in earlier it takes our life earlier and than what it would be if we hadn't been oversaturated with all this comfort, all this things that made excess of comfort and so forth. And also I forgot it. It was one thing at one point there as well. You said something about just recently. If you can refresh my mind there, just.
Well, I mean, I guess I was trying to say that, you know, there's this cerebral way of learning things, and then there's a visceral way of experiencing something.
Yeah, exactly, and that what comes to mind for me, and let's see what to say about that. That's also in the tradition, in the Orthodox faith, that Orthodox, it's the right way of worship, and we use our body. If you read the saints from Athos and so forth, you see they also are very conscious of the physical participation with your prostration and with
this ritual.
And all the walking, the distance walking and so forth. Sometimes they use donkeys now in the modern times, I think, but wasn't it more common in the olden days that they almost walked everywhere?
You know, when I was at Mount Athos as a teenager, I was there for the first time when I was 14. That would have been like the year 2000, and there were very limited cars on the peninsula. So just to bring the audience up to speed, so Mount Athos is a peninsula in northeastern Greece, and it's a collection of 23 monasteries or more that have been around for 1,200 years. It's a World UNESCO Heritage Site. So, not only do Greeks find it extraordinary, but the world has recognized it as a beautiful place. And the monasteries look like castles. They look like castles. There's gardens everywhere. It's an absolutely beautiful place. And as you walk, that's usually how you get around. You walk from monastery to monastery. There is certainly a reliance on just basic, you need to walk. You need to grow your own food. Now there is more and more technology that's there. There is electricity there now in some ways, shape, or form. There's plumbing, but there's still that core rawness, primitiveness, which is intentional. Because in the Orthodox faith, you can't have monasticism without asceticism. The reality is that monks don't do without women and children and family life and society life to live a carefree way. They eliminate those things to fill it in with even more ascetical practices. Now, we as people living in the world, we need to find sort of that proper balance between some of the practical and that spiritual balance. It's a tough one to strike. It's a tough balance to find. But that's the beautiful thing about fasting, is that it's only within these communities of Mount Athos and these monastic communities that we find the proper way to live, so that we can eliminate, like I said, 90% of disease and extend our lives by 40%. I mean, the average lifespan in America right now, I think, is like 72 years. So imagine 40% more time. That's like you're living into your mid-90s. And when monks from Mount Athos live into the mid-90s, they're not living in intensive care units. They don't have dementia. They don't have Parkinson's. They don't have diabetes. They don't have Alzheimer's. They don't have diseases that are truly tragic in America because of the way they live. And one of the things that makes them live long is something called intermittent fasting, which, of course, everyone knows about now in popular biohack circles. But that's not what they call it. What brought them to that irrational thing? Why would you limit yourself as to when you eat? What brought them to that are basically three things. One was they wanted to fast with Christ to the 9th hour because Christ fasted. Today, it's Good Friday. They wanted to fast with Christ at 3 p.m. because that's when he died. Christ didn't eat, I won't eat. Okay, that sounds irrational. That's kind of weird, but okay. They want to be prepared for communion every day because they want to have their souls prepared for communion. They go to sleep, it's a miniature death. They wake up in the morning, it's a miniature resurrection. Are they prepared for communion? Are they prepared for salvation? And if they can say yes to that, they will also intermittent fast. And so what they're doing is they're only eating for a few hours a day. And it's a big meal, but they're only eating for a few hours a day. And that's intermittent fasting. And when you do that to any mammalian species, it lives 30 to 40% longer. Topic sentence. This is huge. And
Yeah.
that's what this book is about, is it tries to show mechanistically, anatomically, physiologically why that happens. And there's a host of processes that your body undergoes to heal itself from within, every cell in your body, when you take this fasting rule seriously. Now, we in the world, we don't fast like monks. So monks don't eat meat ever. And monks, also, they live a certain way that's quite extreme. But when you kind of translate that from the monastic world into our lives, what that basically ends up happening is we, for 200 days, give up meat. We fast from many, many different things, but it's a big portion of the year. Now, we as human beings are omnivores. We're supposed to eat meat and dairy. We're supposed to eat meat and vegetables. And this is fine, but it's in that balance, that cadence of the church, Wednesdays and Fridays, 48 days leading up to Easter, 40 days leading up to Nativity, weeks over the summer. Within this dynamic seasonal change, our bodies then kind of adapt and go through changes. And just like the seasons of the year, nothing is static, nothing is always. That's kind of ossification if you don't change it up every once in a while. And so, it's not to say that people don't have particular health limitations, or they don't have certain pathologies or illnesses that they need to take seriously. Now, in the Orthodox Church, everything's very pastoral. So we have a goal. We recognize what the goal is. We recognize what the par excellence is, but then we have a pastoral way of getting there. And, some people won't be able to necessarily go vegetable, for 200 days a year. But there's other ways to mimic that state. And what I've tried to do with the Athos diet is to tell people who have, frankly speaking, over the last 2,000 years, have kind of forgotten the parameters and have forgotten how to be healthy with those parameters. Like I was a young kid. I was also pretty chubby, husky, because I was fasting, but I was eating all the candy and white bread I could eat. Like those things didn't have meat and dairy in them. I was eating all day long. I was eating all the wrong foods. And so the last 8 years of my life, because I wrote this book when I was in medical school, that's about 8-9 years ago. Essentially, I realized that we're not eating enough protein. We're eating way too much processed foods. We're eating way too often throughout the day, and we're not staying active enough. And so when you look at these practices in Mount Athos and various other monasteries and convents throughout the world, when they are healthy people, in addition to just spiritually strong people, but when there's both, and that's what we want, right? If we're going to fast, we might as well do it right. When we have both, basically what they do is they eat a confined amount a day, which is intermittent fasting. I recommend between 4 and 8 hours a day, 4 and 8 hours a day of eating. And a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, that sounds so crazy. It's not crazy at all. It's not crazy at all. The average American has 60 pounds of extra weight. They could easily go 3 months without eating. And in fact, the Guinness World Record holder of not eating went over a year. He just had water and vitamins and I think some yeast. He went over a year. So here we are thinking, oh my God, Dr. Pete's saying I can only eat 4 to 8 hours a day. You don't even know your own strength. And this is part of the paradigm shift. We want people to realize just how extraordinary they are, how much power they have. It's an absolute paradigm shift. And then, of course, with this protein side of things, we can still have shrimp during the fasting schedule. There are plants that have more protein than others. And then, of course, with the activity, I tell people they can lose about 10% of their body weight in 48 days if they follow these parameters. And they don't have to do CrossFit. They don't have to run marathons. They just have to walk. And for those people that want to do more, you can totally do that. I just interviewed someone this morning. His name is Braden Wirch. He's a power lifter, bodybuilder. And he just discovered orthodoxy like 18 months ago. And he just did his first Great Lent. I mean, this guy looks like a mythological being. Now, he was on some steroids. no longer. But he just did the 48 days of fasting, and he is deciding, because he's a health expert, he just wants to be as big and bad as he can be. He's actually not going back to the old way. He's just going to keep going with the fasting schedule. So, what to say? I mean, it's such a paradigm shift. And so, again, not all of us, given our health backgrounds, can always do everything like the monks do, but there's other ways to create that asceticism. Like, for instance, what I would say is, if you can't do plant-based because of health problems, go keto, like true keto.
Yeah.
Not like, my spiritual father said I can have eggs whenever I want, and I'm eating all the other crap. No. Create some strong parameters that really create some sense of urgency and a sense of limitation, and your health will benefit, and you will also get that spiritual benefit as well.
Yeah, exactly. And the comment doesn't work that but the monks, they just they don't work hard jobs, and they just walk around all day and so forth. That's not consistent, because from my own experience, I eat once a day, work hard, physical, run. My dad, he had a moving company. So when I was a teenager and up to my 20s, mid 20s, I worked 10 hours a day running the stairs up and down,
Yeah.
pianos and big heavy furnitures and so forth, and then go train afterwards, and then go home and eat. No problem. Okay, that will differ a lot from person to person. But my point is, it's I know when a person say, I will have problems with doing that, or I won't make that. I can't do that. Oftentimes that is so untrue, because your society have learned everyone that they are so weak that they can't
Right.
do things that their forefathers did. But actually you can. You just have to just take a step in that mindset that you actually can. You can do much more, not just a little bit, but much more. And then also, it's very easy for people today to get hang-ups on the food. But I think you nailed it there in a very simple way. Just cut out the processed foods, and try to eat clean food, and have some rules, as you said. Have some rules, and don't deviate from the rule. So, but with there is this little problem we have nowadays with food from the ocean, because the ocean has many microplastics and is polluted.
Yeah.
And then also vegetables. I think I can imagine that the monks on Mount Athos, they have very good organic vegetables, but here you have pesticides, and US is even worse. I know you have glyphosate, or what?
Yeah. Glyphosate. Yeah.
Glyphosate. Yeah, exactly. That's actually banned in the Europe.
My wife is a lawyer, and she worked with company. Like, there are huge lawsuits over that stuff right now. People are getting Parkinson's. They're getting various forms of cancer. I mean, it's like the hippies from the 1970s were right. Like they really were. And but it's so funny. It's like, if you have a society that's so consumeristic and trying to create everything at the cheapest price, cutting corners, making it cheap, gaming the system, you will have an area the size of Texas floating in the Pacific Ocean of plastic, which is true. You will have, endless acreage of food that's made in plenty that's kind of poison. You will have genetically modified, foods that we've never consumed ever in the history of humankind. All of this stuff comes with this curiosity, this obsession with tools and technology for the sake of, I don't know what, I guess just making more of it. And then our human, I mean, it's so funny. I was in Greece. Every summer I go to Greece, and I was there, and I was like, man, there is no one here that's overweight like in America. And then I saw the exception. Across the sea on another beach was a huge lady. And you know where she was from? America. And it's crazy. It's so crazy, and it's such a funny thing. There's this this amazing book called The Witcher, which was made into a TV show. And the concept of the book basically is that human beings sin, they create monsters, and then this individual called the Witcher has to come up and clean up the mess, But it's basically like human nature. Like, Jesus is supposed to be the Witcher, I guess, and other human beings make problems, but it's the same exact thing in real life. Like, we have these spiritual defects that, if you take them to scope and scale, because that's what we can do in 2025, we can take a problem and make a problem for everyone. It used to be just limited by zip code, by region, by valley, by river system. Now you can take that and scale it up. It's called globalization. Everyone suffers, and it's a big problem. as we become grander and grander and greater and greater, our reach expands and our problems magnify. They absolutely magnify, and it's really catching up to the real world. And there's going to be some growing pains. But you know what? For those people who are already training and fasting and signing up for the uncomfortable, when the problem happens, I I don't think it's gonna harm us so much, because we'll already be prepared. But there's going to be a lot of people that aren't prepared, that will have never had an IV in their arm, who have never had who have never had to go through healing of a broken bone, or limitation of when they eat and what they eat, and they're used to getting that high from every time they drink a soda. They're gonna have some big coping problems. I think the United States gave $10 billion in soda subsidies to poor people last year. We're literally killing our own people. We're creating an unhealthy population. Like, why are we doing this? And it's all subsidies. It's all a subsidy for corporate America, and it's destroying lives. It really is.
Yeah, and many, let's say, normies would. I don't know if there is any normies nowadays. Everyone is fragmented in their own little peculiar way. But you can, if you just follow the money. I know it's cliche, but it's true.
Yeah.
Just follow
It's
the
true.
money. Look at the big companies that produce the GMO and so forth, and then look at the pharmaceutical companies.
Yes.
They are the big investors in both domains, and it's like, I give you this food, it will make you sick, and when you're sick, you can take this medicine that I also have, and when this medicine doesn't work and make you feel even worse, I have a even better medicine, so take this. So
Yeah.
it's and that was something I wanted to ask you, that from what I have seen and seen some interviews with you and read your book, is that you have a quite holistic perspective on health and so forth, as one should have. Yeah, actually, but still you work in how to say it,
In a
medical.
reactive space like the emergency department. No, this is an
Yeah,
interesting
but
observation.
I think what I'm trying to get at was, you're working in the commercial medical institution. So I just want to hear some from your perspective. How do you hold these two? Because I can think that I can imagine that you get some critics and so forth. Because I know how hard-headed many doctors and people from that environment are, if they get critical, competitive studies and so forth that they didn't learn through their education.
Mhm.
Or do you hear what? Or do you see what I try to
Yeah.
get at there?
No, you touch on a very important dilemma. And there's two problems. There's two problems that each group has to be accountable. One is that you're absolutely right. There's this corporate America that is making a lot of money on many things, and specifically taking care of a sick population of people. So the sicker they get, the more money they make. And I don't necessarily think that there's someone sitting in a room sort of nefariously trying to do that, but you don't have to. You just have to be so materialistic and so profit oriented that manifests as all these other things. So it's more of like a second, third, fourth order effect of a wrong alignment that manifests in all these problems. The second thing is that the American population is now a culture of comfort and instant gratification, and no one wants to put the work in. So one of the reasons I actually wanted to become a family doctor when I was in medical school, and I had this idea that I would go around house to house, talking with people for hours about their health, trying to bring in the holistic way of things. And I realized very, very quickly, there's no time. There's no time and there's no money in that. And so The reason I chose emergency medicine was that for certain hours of the day, I get to go in, I find the problem, I solve the problem, and I move on. No one wants to hear from their doctor in the emergency department how they should stop smoking. No one from the emergency department wants to hear about how they need to lose weight. The patients don't want to do that. They want to take a pill. They want an easy fix. And in order to convert them into a different way of thinking, we need hours of discussion, which I'm happy to have. But there's just not enough time. The volume model in American medicine is so extreme and so intense. I mean, the reality is I see people, they're in the emergency department for an average about 3 hours when they come to the emergency department. I see them face to face probably 15 minutes. And I'm running from room to room to room, literally running from room to room, taking care of the next fire, the next fire, the next fire. There is not time for me to sit down and say, hey, sir, you got to really cut back the smoking. If I'm lucky, I might be able to tell like a 35-year-old that has like a surgical problem that really shouldn't be there till they're 60 to say, hey, man, I'm just letting you know, I'm seeing something in you today that I don't normally see until you're about 60. And what's your food like? And he'll say, oh, I eat really bad. I'm like, you need to clean that up but that's all I can say. That's all I can say. It's 30 seconds. I don't have the narcissism to believe that they're going to listen to anything I said in 30 seconds. I mean, maybe the experience might be so, extreme for them. They'll say, hey, I'm realizing, my gosh, I really need to change my life. But we will do so much better by having people watch your podcast, Netflix documentaries, YouTube videos on best practices. This really needs to be given at a political, cultural level, religious level. And so one of the reasons, and one of the reasons I wrote this book and one of the reasons I'm doing these podcasts is, believe it or not, you and I right now will change more lives through your podcast in the hour that we spend together and send out to the world than I can in a shift, because there's just not any time. There's not enough time. It's by the time you get to the emergency department, you are going to the cath lab to have stents put in your chest, to have your chest cut open because you're having a heart attack. There's no time to talk about smoking. There's no time to talk about healthy foods, avoiding processed foods, stopping, all this stuff. There's no time. And so one of the reasons I do what we're doing here today is because there is a cognitive dissonance. There is a problem, and I have a passion for it. And it's just the system we live in, unfortunately, does not allow for me to do more.
Yeah, it's really great to hear you speaking. Every time you have this really good positive energy that you and don't you don't shy away from pointing out more morbid or more darker aspects of human life and your experience in the ER and so forth. But I can relate to that in many ways because I work as a coach, and it's the same there. I can tell anyone to do anything, but they won't do it if I just say it. They have to be not groomed, but they need to work on discipline, habits, and just doing it over and over again. Then they will realize, okay, this is actually working. Okay, and just tell somebody something. No, that doesn't really work. In the coaching process, you make themselves realize things through questions. So that is a really good way, but that can take very much time. That's also why I compromise it to habits and discipline and so forth when it comes to the more physical part of it. But as you know, the physical part doesn't exclude the inner part. It's it's a seesaw there,
Yes.
They will be in equilibrium with each other. So
and you also find too that the older the patient, the older the person, the more difficult it is to make change, which is also why in the wisdom of the Orthodox Church, we get people in, they get baptized right away. They have communion right away. They start fasting very early. We are asking children, to the extent that they can, to participate as hard as they can. and then this continues for the rest of their lives. And so this is why, education systems, getting kindergarten kids to go out and get exercise and to eat healthy foods during the lunch and to develop a palate, a taste for what is healthy versus what is just oversaturated is so important. And this is also why, as a society, we have to really market and reinforce and encourage and support people from a young age, because you might even say, I hate to say it, but there's a certain generation of people that are too old for change. I mean, yes, there'll be exceptions. Yes, there are ways that we can kind of illuminate them, but it's tough. It's tough, and it also speaks to human nature. It's repentance is difficult, transformation is difficult, and especially in America, where we are Protestants, generally speaking, and you're like, accept God and you're done. Like that speech is so toxic. It is destroying America. It's destroying lives, because people get this idea, because they don't realize what you aim for spiritually is what you manifest in your life. And if you think something is good, like, oh, I get it and I'm finished, then of course you're going to reach for pills. Of course you're going to reach for infomercials and exciting gadgets that are supposed to do something that really don't work, make you feel good for a few days, but then you'll fail. And that's why we spend $60 billion a year on diets and wellness in the United States, and our health outcomes are so bad. So it's a dilemma, but it's why, again, it speaks to how we need to have a spiritual aim and recognition of what's really going on, and early intervention. Because as you get older, it just becomes more and more difficult to make changes. Better to just have a child know that this is just what they always did. It's just what they always did. I think it was Suzuki. He wrote a book on playing the violin. Really, he was a famous violinist, and there was a Suzuki method. And essentially, he starts out his book by saying, it's amazing to me how difficult Japanese is to learn, but children by the age of 6 can speak it fluently. How's that possible? Like, you get an adult in there to try to learn this language, like all their intellectual ability, they can't do it. What's going on? A 6-year-old has already done it. And he speaks to this idea of the apprenticeship, of living a discipline, of really trying to bring that into your life at an early age. And that is the answer. It's very difficult later on. And it's not to say that we're hopeless later on in life. There's always a way to make it work, but it then demands more work, and it requires more pain. And by definition, if you've gotten to it late, you might not have already learned the lessons that are so key, because otherwise things would have been different, So it's a dilemma, but it's something we're going to have to really face head on. And like I said, I think these types of podcasts, these open discussions, and the way that we can scale and scope good things through the internet, through the Orthoverse, through YouTube and Instagram, etc. It's a phenomenal way of at least making people aware of what can be done and what should be done. At least they'll have an aim, some sense of common goal. Otherwise, we're just going to persist in doing the same thing, and we keep getting heavier and heavier health, and our health issues sort of follow that. My last statistic I'll share with you, something like 70% of draft age males in the United States would not be able to make it to boot camp in the Army. So like we literally have a population that's so sick at a young age that they can't even defend our nation if necessary. Once the 70%, you get those 30%, most of them can't survive boot camp. And this was a huge problem. And they've made major changes to try to evaluate that and see what they could do to make things different. But the reality is that, it's even worse now. This pattern was noticed 10 years ago, and it's even worse now. And it's funny, we keep talking about America posturing to China and Ukraine and Russia, and the reality is I think it's all a freaking bluff. I mean, again, we have drones, okay, we have planes, okay, but if we had to like literally invade and occupy a space and place outside of the elite few who sign up for it, and we had to rely on the common man against everyone else's common man, I think the U.S. loses every time. if you had to recruit all the men of China against all the general men of America, I mean, we are so soft. We are so addicted to comfort that I think we would just say, hey, just let us keep watching Netflix at least, like take over, no problem,
Yeah, yeah, and wouldn't you say also, if you paint this picture in your mind that the U.S. going to war with all this unfit, untrained people, that it's not just that they are addicted to the comfort; it's also they are numb, they are
Mm.
apathic, they are how to say it, they are un. Unprovoked of their environment.
Hmm.
They live in this fantasy world. They are like brain fogged.
You
So
might
their
be,
reaction is,
yeah, you might
yeah.
be, actually, it's probably more literal. I mean, a lot of them do actually. I remember hearing a discussion about this. There's millions of men who are unemployed, on drugs, smoking weed, on ADHD medication, and playing video games, like
Yeah, it's
in
crazy.
all day long. It's on the order of millions, and they're not like 50-year-olds. They're like in the prime of their lives, 20s and 30s, where they're supposed to be working the hardest. Their veins are filled with piss and vinegar, as they say,
Yeah.
and no, they're not using it for any of those things. Not at all. Not at all. But I really appreciate you bringing me on your podcast. I hope we can do future rounds together, and I appreciate you finding me. Um, I'm getting ready to go to our next service actually. So
Okay, great. Okay.
oh, you know
I
what?
won't.
Let me reset this. Let me reset this. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
want
yeah.
us to end on this
I
confusing
really
moment. Huh?
appreciate you coming on. I was surprised that you got on so quickly as well. So really, really glad for that. I think I have one thing I want to try out. You will be the first one. It will be a quick one, if you have a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little final segment here. So so I will ask you 5 yes or no questions and try to answer them as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And I know it may or may not create a false dichotomy, but so yes or no and a why in the end. And then
Okay.
I will, in every question, I will say what I thought you would say.
Okay.
So, okay, the first one, Saturday or Sunday?
Sunday.
Sunday. Why?
Sunday is a day of rest. It's a reset. The family gets together. It's a well-rounded day. We get to church. We have some good food. There's a little extra time to kind of catch up on things, but maybe get some exercise. It's a nice reset, and it's a day to sort of live the week twice because you finally have time to kind of reflect on all that happened, and it's almost like you can sort of finally digest all that occurred when you're not doing the next thing. So that's why I would pick Sunday.
Yeah, and I put Sunday here as well because that's what I thought is actually my favorite day in the week. Um, cardio or weightlifting?
Oh, I'm a weightlift guy. I played a lot of rugby to trick myself into getting cardio. So as the old saying is, I'm kind of like a dog. If there's not a ball involved, you just can't get me to move. Um, but yeah, weightlifting comes more natural. Cardio, I always need to do more of. But yeah, if I had to pick, it'd be weightlifting.
Yeah, I put weightlifting. You're quite a buff guy, so
Okay,
I
great, thank
thought
you.
that. Yeah, urban or rural?
Yeah, rural 100%. If
Yeah,
I want to go urban, I drive there in Mercedes and I do what I want to do and I leave as fast as possible. But yeah, and I will say this, urban American cities feel very different from urban European cities. I mean, there is some beautiful urban settings in Europe. It just doesn't exist in the US, and at least not very frequently. So at least in the US, I would pick rural.
yeah, yeah. I picked that for you as well here, and for myself. U.S. or Greece?
If I could make a lot of money in Greece, I would go to Greece, hands down. Like no
Yeah,
questions asked. Culturally, historically, geographically, I mean, it's just um but I lived there actually for 14 months at one point. I was always going there as a kid, but I lived there continuously for 14 months. And my wife and I, we were just married, and it became very clear that if there was a ceiling, like we would live well, but we wanted a little bit more, and if I wanted to have 4 kids like I do today, or to have things I could give to my children, I just had to be somewhere else to make a living. But I am happy to say that I'm a landowner in my home, my village home in Lefkada, Western Greece. And so my plan is to retire there for sure.
Oh, that's a lovely plan. I really
Yeah.
get warmth in my heart to hear that. Going home to your forefathers,
Yeah.
grandfathers,
Yeah,
so
hands
important.
down.
Coming back to the soil. So, cold or heat?
Ooh, I think this is a tough one. I mean, I'm thinking about like cold plunge versus sauna. I'd probably
Yeah.
I'd probably do sauna. I'd probably do the sauna, but I've tried both, and goodness, I'd probably go heat. I'd probably go hot. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I thought so too. You're from your origin is from
Yeah,
Greece. It's quite hot in the summer.
it is. It
So
is.
yeah,
It's a dry
and
heat though, so it's good. It's like sauna heat,
yeah, it was a long time since I was there, but I remember it was quite
Yeah.
hot. So I just want to see. I had 2 guys on my podcast that I think would be really interesting to see you talking to. I don't know. Maybe you know James Cortides. Have you talked to him?
Yes, actually, I did.
He's a Greek brother of
Yeah.
yours.
A few years ago, he and I connected once,
Okay.
and we talked about fasting, and we talked about his background and some of his life's his history, and yeah, great guy. I'm connected with him on Facebook too. Yeah, James Cortides,
Yeah.
great guy. He
Yeah.
also has children and a beautiful blonde wife. Yeah, just like me.
Yeah. Okay. That in common as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So was it on your podcast or so? If I want
I
to share it out.
Yeah, I believe I had him on I believe I was on his podcast ultimately. Yeah,
Okay.
The Rooster. I think he calls it The
The
Rooster
rooster. Yeah.
podcast.
Exactly. The
Yes, I was
roosters
on that one.
crow.
It was during COVID-19 actually too. So I was in the healthcare space and he was too, and it was a good
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah, The Rooster. Yep.
Yeah, nice. And also another guy that might be interesting. I had him on for my last episode, but I haven't published it yet. I will publish it in some couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Jordan, Kyle Jordan Maxwell. He's
Not
practitioner
familiar.
in neurology and so forth. He's becoming an MD in neuroscience, and
Oh wow.
he have a podcast as well. He had John Vervaeke on, and
Ah.
also
Yeah,
Jay
yeah.
Dyer.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I would
might
love to
be.
connect with him. I'm always exploring more and more between this gut brain axis, and it's we didn't get into too much of the physiology today, but it's very cool to see the science. Like I said, it's really interesting how in the fasting interviews we sometimes we take more of a philosophical sort of cultural kind of exploration, and then other
Yeah,
times we dive into the science. But the cool thing is that there's both of those spheres apply. That's the cool
exactly.
thing about fasting.
They emerge a marriage between the 2
Yes.
domains.
Well said.
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining me
Oh,
today,
my pleasure. My
Pete. It
pleasure.
was very great. Such a hard struggling guy there, and always brings thoughts for the mind to reflect on.
I wish you a wonderful resurrection, Kalopaska, Kali Anastasi, as we say, and I wish you a wonderful Easter with family and friend. And it's the stakes are high, and fasting I think really is the salve the suffering, and we are trying to figure this all out together. But I'm an ally, man. I'm an ally. So just please keep me close, and I hope we get to connect again soon.
Yeah, likewise, and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye. So that's the end of episode 7. And in our next episode, episode 8, we will be joined by Mark Connor, who is a boxing coach, Irish Catholic. Among many things, he also the writer and author of the book It's About Time, 1,000,000 copies sold for Dad. So join us then And until next time, I thank you for tuning in. Bye.